A detour off the beaten path. That's the Canonflex camera, both for Canon itself as well as for myself collecting and using vintage cameras. Hi everybody, I'm Laszlo Vasco. This is my micro adventure channel where we've been tracing the story of photography for the past 130 years. Going decade by decade. We've been exploring the 1950s, and this is the last camera I'm going to be reviewing from the 50s, launched in 1959, the Canonflex SLR camera, Canon's first single lens reflex camera. I'm also going to be looking at and jumping into the 1960s with the Canonflex RM. And this is the last of the series for Canon, and it launched in 1962. So this sort of bookends the Canonflex series of cameras, of which there were mainly four different models. You could argue, or I could argue, it was a detour for Canon because it was a series of cameras initially aimed at professional photographers, and it didn't really catch on. So then they kind of wondered and attempted to salvage the whole thing and coming up with models that were more enthusiast oriented. But it didn't quite succeed the way Canon intended. And so hence a detour. And it's also a detour for myself. So for those that have been with me, you might note that I've been collecting and reviewing and shooting with primarily Minolta cameras from Japan, Voigtlander cameras from Germany, and Ensko cameras from the US. Although you could see that I'm starting to have lots of detours in this story. I was last reviewing the Konica Pearl medium format folding camera, and then prior to it I was reviewing some Olympus cameras. So excuse the various detours, and here's another one, and that is Canon. And this was prompted by the fact that I have a good friend in the UK who shoots with Canon cameras. So I wanted to explore what Canon produced. And the Canonflex caught my eye for its unique look and design with this black pentaprism on this chrome. I mean, it is a very distinctive camera that just looks very different from what was available at the time or since, and even more so for the Canonflex RM with its pentaprism sort of set into this top plate. It's almost like a rangefinder camera with a slight hump. So both of these caught my eye and wanted to get and try them out. And it's great to enjoy these. So I don't know what your approach is to collecting cameras, and feel free to comment below. I established this thought of framing my collection around these three cameras. Then this way I'm covering the three different continents and countries of Japan, Germany, and the US, and it gives me something to sort of focus on. Otherwise, I don't know, you could just be overwhelmed just with the sheer amount of endless possibilities of collecting different cameras. And you can spend all your money trying to chase all of them, but if you establish a framework, then it sort of works. And so that hence my thought process. But jumping around a little bit and exploring different cameras is lots of fun, because this is very different. It feels very different to Voigtlander and Minolta from an SLR concept. Ensko, of course, didn't have an SLR camera. But compared to those two, I would say, in the Minolta SR that I've reviewed in a little while ago, indeed, it was such a modern camera when it came out that it still feels like a modern camera, and it doesn't really feel like you're shooting with something from the 50s. Voigtlander, on the other hand, does feel like you're shooting from the 50s when I reviewed the Voigtlander Bessomatic. Whereas I would compare Minolta to a Toyota Corolla and the Voigtlander to maybe a Bentley or something like that. And other cameras like Zeiss to a Mercedes or Leica to a Porsche. The Canonflex I would compare to a tractor. But a very well-built tractor, like your favorite John Deere tractor that you pull out of the shed and cut your grass with, that just grows very close to your heart, and it's always works and is well built. And that's indeed what the Canonflex feels today. It feels very much like a tool aimed at a serious photographer, and it feels very tactile and tractor-like, I guess. But it's a wonderful camera, and it equally grew to my heart, and I became fond of both of these cameras and the way they handle and feel and shoot. They have, I would say, a soul is what I was thinking. The shutter mechanism, for some reason, and I don't know if this is going to come out on the video, but it really vibrates, which is probably not good for image sharpness. And indeed, I kind of noticed later on, we'll look at the images I got with these. Perhaps there is a bit of a shutter shock on this first version. The second one is a little bit smoother, but what's really neat, especially when you set it to the slow speeds, is it just continues to resonate. It almost feels like a cuckoo clock or something like that, or a grandfather clock with its shutter mechanism. That even after the shutter closes, it continues to run for a little bit, which is common on these mechanical ones, but not usually this loud. So somehow, to me, I don't know, that's the way I would describe it, is both of these cameras have great soul to them, and despite being a Minolta fan, I really, enjoyed shooting with these, and I have to admit, I enjoy shooting with these more than I did with the Minolta SR cameras with the SR1. You may take that as an endorsement for you to go ahead and try one of these, and you would be, I think, pleasantly surprised how fun they are to shoot with. But let's take a look at some of its features and discuss maybe why this was a detour and wasn't quite so successful, and dispel, I don't know if we're going to dispel any myths, but I think some of the common wisdom out there as to why these didn't succeed, I'm having difficulty believing it. One was the timing. This did come to market after the Nikon F by a whole month. It was launched May of '59. Nikon F launched April of '59. So I don't see timing being an issue. I don't think Canon were late to the game. SLRs, of course, were starting to come out from Japan and from the early '50s, from Asahi, Miranda in mid-50s. Minolta came out in '58. But none of those really aimed for the professional market until Nikon came out with the Nikon F. But Canon too aimed at the professional market with this camera. It too featured a removable, pentaprism, and Canon had big ambitions for this. They were going to create all sorts of finders. They never did because the camera wasn't taking off. But I'm not totally sure exactly why. And I think it could be a combination maybe of its features in comparison to the Nikon F, which was really well designed. Admittedly, Nikon took all the best ideas, put them into one camera. It was an immediate hit with professionals. And Nikon already had a well-established marketing approach aiming at the professional photographers with their rangefinder cameras, more so than Canon. And so I think they kind of, latched onto the Nikon F. But still, it's pretty neat. I've mentioned before, too, when I was reviewing cameras from Ensco, I love collecting and getting cameras where the manufacturer really tried their best. And that's what this is from Canon, and aimed for the top and didn't quite succeed, and because of some quirky decisions that they made. And it's really fun to collect and to use those cameras because it gives you a very different shooting experience. So one of those was the bottom-mounted film advance lever that Canon carried through from their rangefinder cameras. And with the benefit, of course, and the thought being at the time, is that 35 millimeter, which was the small format, was great for photojournalists, for action photography, things like that. So why not have a winder that's really quick? You focus with your left hand, and without moving any of your hands, you can keep your sort of fourth finger right on here, and as you focus, you're able to advance, and let me set it at a faster shutter speed, and you know, and this is like a motor drive, and take rapid pictures, because it doesn't require you to reposition your hand, as opposed to having the traditional winder where you will wind. You can't possibly shoot as fast as this. The only thing I can compare it is the Voigtlander Vitessa, where you had those plunger winders really quick. You can go like that. Anyway, so to me that was a neat feature and a logical one. It did mean that the tripod mount is in a different spot. A lot of people make big stink about this, but at the time, studio photographers, landscape photographers were not using 35 millimeter. They really weren't. They were using large format cameras, or if they wanted to make it portable, they were using medium format cameras, not 35 millimeter. So I can't believe that the tripod placement is what doomed the Canonflex. So it's neither the timing, in my opinion, neither the winding mechanism. Yeah, later on as motor winders came out, this wouldn't fit it, but I'm having just disbelief that that was the case. It didn't have some other features. It didn't have a mirror lockup. Again, that would be useful for tripod shooting, and I just don't believe that professionals who were using tripods would elect a 35 millimeter camera in the 1950s or late 50s. So I just don't think so. I think it was Nikon's ambitious efforts and marketing effort, and the cost of this being aimed at professionals, and with professionals latching on and already latched on to Nikon. I think that was the main issue. This was too expensive of a camera for Canon. Again, please comment below if you feel otherwise, but a lot of other videos make big hoopla about these features, and I just don't see why that would have been such a big issue, especially since these days that's what makes it fun to shoot with this, is having this unique winder mechanism. And it's also neat to, of course, have the removable prism. Even without other finders, the ground glass is set well in, allowing you to shoot effectively from the waist. So that's kind of a neat feature. So moving on, let's take a look at some of the other features, like the exposure meter that attaches on right here onto the front. So as opposed to Minolta's, which latched onto the top and attached to your shutter speed dial, this one attaches to the front, and then it couples via basically a cog. So you want to make sure you set it to the same shutter speed as your camera, and then it clips on by sliding in from the side, pressing the release button, and again to clip it on. It doesn't work, unfortunately. I wish it did, but it does look pretty cool hanging out on the front. So another neat little add-on. The Canon featured a cloth focal plane shutter, so it was similar to their rangefinder. I mean, both of these, Nikon based their Nikon F on their rangefinder cameras, and so did Canon. It sort of made sense. The Canonflex R2000 camera, which looks identical to this, but it featured a 1/2000th of a shutter speed, came out in I think in the following year, in 1960 perhaps. And so that was sort of revolutionary. That was the first SLR camera to feature 1/2000th of a shutter speed, and it still didn't sway the pros. And then the other unique aspect of it is the lens mount. So many other manufacturers have started to invent, or come out with their own mounts, like the SR mount for Minolta, which are bayonet mounts where you put the lens in and you turned it. Canon's is different, and of course, for other Canon shooters, you'll recognize this because their later lenses were all the same, where it offered a breech connector where you had to, put the lens on straight, and without turning it and wearing the lens itself, you rotated this ring on it to lock it on. So this was called the Canon R mount. It lasted till until the end of the series, and then they moved on to their FL mount, if I remember correctly. Again, I'm not a Canon aficionado, but the Canon R mount initially had lenses that weren't fully automatic, but they quickly started to come out with their Canon Super Canomatic lenses, which featured fully automatic apertures, meaning that the aperture would stay open. It would automatically close down when you took the picture, and it would automatically open back up. The camera bodies themselves offered automatic mirror return, so it was contemporary from that perspective. Automatic mirror return and full automatic aperture control as well. Interestingly, the camera body did not feature a depth of field preview button. Instead, the lenses, or at least these Canon Supermatic lenses that automatically shut down and opened up, as a consequence, offered a second aperture ring. The original first Canon R lenses, which had to be manually shut down, as you closed it down, you would have preview. So to rectify with these automatic lenses, Canon installed two aperture rings. So the first one is the aperture preset. That's what you set, and then the camera will close down to that aperture when it takes the picture. But you could preview your aperture by turning the second ring to your desired stop, taking a look and previewing it and turning it back. Definitely not as convenient as pressing a lever, as many other, like the SR series had as well, to be able to close it down and preview it. So maybe that was another nuisance that the professionals didn't support. But take a look at these lenses. Aren't these lenses just beautiful? I think the finish on them is a gloss black, and it's a very durable finish, or at least the ones I have, still look great. So compared to Minolta's matte black lenses or chrome lenses for German manufacturers, I just think that these high gloss black lenses from Canon just look fantastic, and I also love the orange marking. So I think they're beautiful lenses. They're sort of big for what they are. This is an f1.8 50 millimeter lens, and I have on the RM the 35 millimeter lens. It's a 35 millimeter f2.5. That's pretty decently fast 35 millimeter lens, and again, just beautiful in my opinion. Such a beautiful finish, and feels wonderful. So I got pretty excited. I did not get further lenses. There's a 100 millimeter f2 lens that's highly desirable, and I've been pieing for one of those, and hopefully I'll still get one, but I want to get one that is in just as nice condition as these, because these days are beautiful glass. Let's move on to the RM. So after the flop of the Canonflex original one, Canon pivoted to the enthusiast market, and they came out with the RP right afterwards in 1960, which looks pretty much the same without a interchangeable prism. So they've kind of downgraded the camera. Then they came out with the R2000, upping up the speed for their Pro series with the same prism, removable prism. And then finally, a very different design, and that was the RM. And to accommodate the light meter, they needed to raise the top plate and kind of merged it in with the pentaprism, and I think it is a very distinctive, unique style. And when you shoot with this, it almost doesn't seem like you're shooting with an SLR camera. Yeah, so it had a very large meter. This one still works. It had a very funky meter readout right here on the left, a large readout, and of course it's coupled to your shutter speed dial, and then it indicates the aperture you should set the camera to. So as opposed to having a needle inside the camera, it read out on the top, which was common for the era. Indeed, when this came out in '62, Minolta launched the SR7 with also a similar built-in light meter with one key difference. That one was a CDS meter. It was already more sophisticated than this one. Nevertheless, due to the size, this one still works and it doesn't require a battery, so that's lots of fun. Although I did have to assemble both of these cameras, so let me jump to that myth. I'm not sure if it's a myth, but these are well known to be very reliable cameras. With that said, both of the ones I initially got were advertised to work and they didn't. That was very frustrating. So I first went for the RM. So the first RM I got, it was supposed to work. It did not. The shutter didn't work properly on this camera, on the slower shutter speeds, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. But the light meter worked. So I then bought a second one that had a great working shutter, including all shutter speeds. You can still hear this grandfather clock. Uh-oh. That was the one second. Come on, baby. Oh, don't tell me that got stuck. All right, I had to hold on the button a little bit more. Maybe I didn't release that properly. Let me see. I'm not gonna, so that's half a second. A little bit slow, but it still works. So what I did was, but the light meter didn't work in it. So what I did was, took the two apart and transported the light meter over. And then for the Canonflex itself, the one I found, and it was at a swap meet, it worked just fine, which is actually this one. It worked just fine. It was just so beat up. The top plate, it was all dinged up and stuff. And I found another one that didn't work properly, but looked somewhat better. And I cobbled, I swapped the top plate over, etc. And I also adjusted the shutter return on this. It wasn't exactly closing perfectly either. So I adjusted that, especially for the top speeds, which is a common issue on these, that by the time you move up to 500th or 1000, the second shutter is too quick and you're not getting any exposure. All right, so back to and to finish up with the RM. Now the winder moved back up to the top, so that's less unique, but still very nice design features. I love the film. It's like in a round little bubble. Here it's in a tiny, it's much smaller. On the Canonflex it's a much smaller this round counter window. Yeah, I mean, so this started to have a more traditional or what became industry standard way of setting your self-timer. So it loses some things, but with the overall design, it still has a very distinctive look, and I think equally fun to shoot with. Obviously, you're interchanging the two lenses on it, so the images are going to be dictated by the lens and not the camera. So let's take a look at the images that we obtained. So with the Canonflex shooting up in Rockland, Maine, and Camden, Maine. Actually, this is Rockland Harbor, and a bit of an overcast sky. with the boats, both the 50mm and I think the 35mm lenses do quite well. And then this was a fun little outing to Sterling Airport, taking some shots of this Stairman and Cub, and again, pretty nice rendering, great out of focus background. And then if we take a look at the RM, this was on a trip to Martha's Vineyard, to Katama Airport that we flew into. They've got these great biplanes there that they offer rides in from Edgartown Harbor. They were fun to shoot with, produced great images, and I would highly recommend you obtaining one of these. I mean, not many people have them. Of course, Canon then they didn't quite give up on it, obviously, but they started to come out with their various F-series cameras afterwards and modified the lens mount, coming out with the FL mount. Well, anyway, that covers the Canonflex series, my Detour. I hope that perhaps you decide to take a similar detour, and let me know in the comments if any other thoughts about the Canonflex. And also, please, subscribe to my channel and follow along. We're now going to be looking at the 1960s. A lot of interesting cameras with a lot of interesting design. And that's going to be the theme for the 60s, is design. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.